Good morning, friends. Today we are going to discuss about satire in Gulliver's Travels. With me in the studio we have Dr. Beena Mahida. She is the principal of Anand Arts College. She is also the syndicate member as well as the chairman of Board of Studies. This is Dr. Himanshu Srivastav. Let us first discuss the general characteristics about the Augustan age, which is very important for us to study. What we will be doing is we will be studying the literary tendencies, and then we will be switching over to the satire as an element, and then later on we will be looking about the political scenario of the age in which Gulliver's Travels was written, and then why Gulliver's Travels is a satire. So I'll just request my slides to be shown. 18th century in England is known as Augustan age. It is also known as the age of Pope, Neoclassical age, or the age of Queen Anne. The reign of Augustus Caesar is known as the golden age in the Roman history, and that is why it is known as the Augustan age from the name of the king Augustus. It witnessed in all around development in art and literature, trade and commerce. The phrase Augustan we have already discussed. In both the ages, critical spirit prevailed. The literature produced by artificial society, it was not a literature of creative effort, but of self-conscious and deliberate. It is also known as the age of prose, the age of reason and good sense, the age of set rules and regulations, and finally the point we are going to discuss today is the age of satire. Certain great writers who contributed during this age were Joseph Addison and Steele, Swift that we are going to discuss today, Samuel Richardson, Fielding, the Four Wheels and all, Goldsmith, Dr. Johnson, Pope. Now let us first primarily switch over to what exactly do we mean by satire. Satire, as it is shown on your screen, is primarily a literary genre form. In satire, vices, follies, abuses and shortcomings are held up to ridicule, ideally with the intent of shaming individual and society itself into improvement. That is the main important thing, to improve the society. What are the elements of satire? Must attack an institution. It may be government, it may be politics, religion, education, or so on. It must be humorous. That is the major element. Most of us might convince with a photograph that has been shown on the right hand side. Must use responsibility. In other words, can not outwardly mock anything that could damage the writer's reputation. That is what I said. It should have a message. It must be clear. The target should be very much clear. Formal language, and it should become like a private joke. It involves sophistication and everyone may not get it. So, there are certain things that we should observe before we write a satire, before we try to tag a literary text as satire. These were the originators of satire, the form Juvenal, Horace and Persius. It was developed by Juvenal, Horace and Persius in Rome, and they gave satire its great life force. English satirists were highly influenced by these three people. Now let us first try to know that what is the difference between these three. The Juvenal satirists were vigorous, venomous and caustic, while Horatian satirists were milder. They were gentler in their tendencies. We are going to switch over to the revolution that was very important for the study of Gulliver's Travels as satire, and for that let me ask with me in the studio Dr. Beena. She will be taking over the charge of the mic and will be trying to explain you the political background and why Gulliver's Travels is known as satire? Madam.
Thank you, sir. He has already discussed the characteristics of neoclassical era, the satire, how it was originated. And before discussing Gulliver's Travels as a satire, it is essential for any student to become familiar with Glorious Revolution, which occurred in the year 1688. Actually saying, we can say that the neoclassical era, the neoclassical age or the age of Pope begins with Glorious Revolution and it ends with the death of Jonathan Swift and Mr. Alexander Pope in 1745. Slide please. The Glorious Revolution which occurred in 1688. During that year, James II was a great despot. He was Roman Catholic. The students, they must be familiar with the two branches of Christianity. One is known as Roman Catholic, the second one is Protestant. And in the 16th century, King Henry VIII, he broke from papacy and he established the Church of England, and therefore most of the people in England, they are the followers of not Roman Catholicism, but they are Protestant. But here in 1688, James II, he was a Roman Catholic, and therefore most of the people or the people in Britain, they believe that if this man, if this king, he will rule for a long time, then once again Roman Catholicism will be restored. Once again Pope will dominate the affairs of England, and therefore they were against this James II. And in 1688, slide please, in 1688 he was forced to leave the throne, and his son-in-law William of Orange, he was made the king. William of Orange, his son-in-law, he was a Protestant, and he agreed to rule according to the wishes of the people. So naturally, gradually, we can say that power from the king now passed to parliament. A day arrived when now king is not the dominant personality in England, but whosoever wins in the election becomes the powerful person, and therefore in 18th century we have the emergence of two main political parties in England. One is Tory party and the second one is Whig party. Next. Tory party stands for king, or you can say that it stands for the Church of England. Whig party, it stands for the new merchants and lawyers. It also includes Puritans. Next. The 18th century witnessed politics and literature. Both the things, it became closely connected. Addison and Steele, the essayists, they were given high positions in the state by the Whig party since they were favoring Whig party. The writer of Gulliver's Travels, Swift, he became the chief spokesperson and propagandist of Tory party. And therefore so many critics, they believe that the literary talents of these writers wasted since they were doing their works for political parties. And we are really very much grateful that when Tory party was not in a power, Swift was able to write Gulliver's Travels, and when Whig party was not in power, this Steele and Addison, they were able to give us immortal essays. Next. Now, coming back to our topic, Swift's Gulliver's Travels or satire in Gulliver's Travels. This is just in a brief the life sketch of Swift. Mr. Swift was a posthumous child. He was born in Dublin at Ireland. He was unable to get the love of his father and mother. He was brought up by his uncle Mr. William Temple. He attended Trinity College, and then after he adopted the profession called clergyman, he became clergyman. And then after he was in a love with one girl whose name was Verena, but he received disillusionment in love, and he made two resolutions of his life: never like never to like any children, and it's a really very much ironical that his Gulliver's Travels, it was a very much popular, and still it is very much popular among children. And the second resolution of his life was never to get married. Slide please. Since he was favoring Tory party and he was the spokesperson of Tory party, so these are the political beliefs of Mr. Swift. Next, Swift in the history of English literature is known as a misanthrope because he was a hater of mankind. The kind of experiences that he has in his life, the kind of experiences that he has received in his professional life, we can say that he made him misanthrope. And in order to show that why we can call him misanthrope, the first quotation I have given here, he wrote one day to Pope that I have ever hated all nations, professions and communities, but principally I hate and detest that animal called man. Not only he is a misanthrope, but in the history of English literature he is known as a satirist also. And in order to show that how poignantly he was writing, or he is satirizing the mankind as well as the English people, in Gulliver's Travels in book number 2, we have this very famous satirical comment by Mr. Swift. The king describes the mankind like this: the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. So, the history of English literature remembers Mr. Jonathan Swift as a misanthrope as well as a satirist. Next. Now, if we look at the life experiences, why he has turned as a satirist, why such kind of hatred for the mankind, then during his tenure as a spokesperson of Tory party, he worked a lot for the Tory government, and naturally he expected a reward for his labor in the form of high church appointment. Since he was a clergyman, he expected that he will be made, he can be, he is a qualified person to become the bishop of the Church of England. But he was ignored and he was made the Dean of St. Patrick Church at Ireland. And this particular turning point of his life made him the misanthrope as well as a satirist. And with this particular appointment as a dean, his interest in British politics ended. And then after he spent his whole life at Ireland. Next please. Now exactly which inspired, what was the reason that he wrote this Gulliver's Travels? Now during his stay at London, he had seen the worst of human nature. Since he was attached with the politicians, the courtiers and the kings, and the period that he has spent in London, 1710 to 1713, he has seen the vain pride and the absurd whims of the courtiers. He has seen the stupidity of man. He has seen the stupidity of the monarchs. He has seen the intrigues of the courtiers and the greed of the politicians. He has seen the false glory of the conqueror. And he has seen the treachery of the court. When he was in Ireland, as a dean at St. Patrick Church, he found the Irish people, they are very much poor. They are exploited by the Britishers. Not only that, but the Irish people, they don't know anything regarding their rights. He was a clergyman and his main business is to provide spiritual food. But such kind of corruption in the society, the corruption as well as the vices of the mankind inspire him what to do. He wants to do something for the society. And therefore he decided to create an imaginary world in which he can expose the vices of the mankind. And with this idea, he has created this Gulliver's Travels. Not only this reason, but in 1719, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe became very much popular. And Swift was a member of a Scribblers Club. And during that time, he has already noted down some of the incidents in his diary, and with this background he decided to create one imaginary world, and he wrote Gulliver's Travels. Now let us come to the book. Gulliver's Travels, it is in 4 parts. When he wrote this book, it bears a very long title. The original title of the book was Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World, in 4 parts by Lemuel Gulliver, first a surgeon and then a captain of several ships. But nowadays the novel is known as Gulliver's Travels only, because the title is very much lengthy one. The book is in 4 parts. These are some of the photographs from 4 books. The first book of Gulliver's Travels takes us in the world of Lilliput, or you can say that Lilliputian world is described. In the second book, we are taken in the land of Brobdingnag. The third book, we are taken in a flying island called Laputa. And in the fourth book, we are taken in the world of horses, who are known as Honihims, or you can say that another creatures are also presented, and they are known as Yahoos. Next please. Now no doubt the book is totally full of imagination. It's imaginary world, but in order to show realities and in order to make the book very much plausible, certain means are adopted by Swift. Gulliver's Travels begins with 2 letters. Gulliver, the whole name is Lemuel Gulliver. Gulliver in the very beginning gives us 1 letter. He is the narrator, and therefore we have Captain Gulliver's letter to his cousin and friend Mr. Simpson, in which Gulliver makes some accusations that Mr. Simpson has deleted certain important passages from his diary. It was Mr. Simpson who praised him to publish this account. It was in his diary, and Gulliver asked Mr. Simpson to engage some person to correct the language of that narration, because it was written in a very ordinary language, and it is followed by the publisher to the reader, in which Mr. Simpson, he says that he is familiar with Gulliver from very long time, and he has deleted certain passages which includes minute descriptions of tide, winds and storms. So the 2 letters in the very beginning makes the book, or makes the novel very much realistic. Apart from these 2 letters, we have details of voyages, which includes dates, years. The names of the ships are also given. Names of the captains are also given. Even we have the varieties in names of the places also. So due to all these things, the book appears very much plausible, as well as you can say that it appears very much realistic also. Next please. Now if we look just in a brief, then in the 4 books we have these main characters. In book number 1, we have the main character, means in 4 books Lemuel Gulliver is the main character. He is the narrator of the novel, middle-aged person, very much intelligent, well educated. Next, in book number 1, we have Lilliputians. They have, means we can say that these Lilliputians, they have just only 6, means the maximum height of these Lilliputians were 6 inch. In book number 1, we have the character of Emperor, who is the ruler of Lilliputians, who was very much small in size. Apart from these Lilliputians, we have Flimnap, Reldresal. In book number 2, we have Brobdingnagians. And in Brobdingnagians, we have Brobdingnagian king, the queen. The king was very much intellectual. Apart from this king and queen, Gulliver also present the farmer with whom he lived, and very excellently he presents the character sketch of Glumlal Glitch, who is 9 years little nurse of Gulliver. In book number 4, we have Yahoos and Honihims. So this is just in a brief the characters from 4 books. Now if we look at book number 1, then chapter number 1 begins with Gulliver's childhood. He was he attended Emmanuel College, but at the age of 14 he was taken away from the college because due to some financial problems in the family. Then after he started apprenticeship under one surgeon, and during his spare time he learned navigation, and then after he accepted his job as a surgeon in one ship called Antelope. Now during this voyage the ship was wrecked and he was landed on one unknown island called Lilliput. The description that is given, when he tried to get up, he found that he was arrested or he was tied on the ground. Very small creatures, they were moving around him. Horses, everything were in a small size, and then after he was made the prisoner of that country and he was taken to the capital city. The name of the capital city of Lilliput was Millendo, and then after he was imprisoned in one ancient temple. Next one. Now next day the emperor arrived in order to see this Man Mountain, because he was a giant among these pygmy people. The character that he gives in book number 1 of the emperor, here we find the satire, because the emperor of Lilliput, he looks just like King George the First. King George the First was the ruler that succeeded the throne after Queen Anne, and is ruling when Swift writes the novel. King George was actually German and gains the throne through marriage. Next. In chapter number 3 of book number 1, we have the description of rope dance. Gradually, Gulliver wins the confidence and trust of the emperor. He demanded liberty. Liberty was given, and then after he was invited for rope dance, for diversion, and Gulliver expected that some musical performance or some musical dance will be there, but instead of that he finds that people are dancing on the rope. And he also comes to know that whenever there is any political post is vacant, interested people are invited. They have to show their agility on rope dance. They have to show their cleverness in dancing. How long and how cleverly they dance on the rope determines their position as well as tenure in the court. And whosoever wins or whosoever stands first, second or third, they are given by the emperor blue color ribbon, red color ribbon and green color ribbon. This particular episode that is presented by Swift in book number 1 chapter number 3 represents various orders which George the First used to give, and these orders were the garter, the bath and the thistle. So these orders, we can say it was a cheap way of buying political support, and this particular episode or this political background was given when Swift wrote about rope dance. Next please. In that rope dance, Flimnap, the treasurer of Lilliput, was the best, and here the character of Flimnap represents Robert Walpole, the Whig minister. He was the first Prime Minister of England and he ruled England for more than 20 years. So the character of Robert Walpole was represented by Swift through the character of Flimnap in that rope dance. Next please. Gulliver's Travels is basically political satire, and in chapter number 4 in book number 1 we have very long description, very detailed description of that political satire. One day Reldresal, one character of book number 1, who is a private secretary for private affairs, visited Gulliver at night, and he informed Gulliver that in our country we have two political parties. One is known as High Heels and the second one is known as Low Heels. It is also known as Slamexon and Tramexon. And these two parties is nothing else but it represents the two major political parties of England. The High Heel party stands for the Tory party and the Low Heel party stands for the Whig party. And it is satirized here in chapter number 4. Apart from these two political parties, Reldresal also talks about the divisions that they have in religion also. Next please. According to him, at Lilliput, they have two religious party. One is Big Endians and another one is Small Endians. Big Endians, and friends, you all know that Christianity was divided into two branches in the 16th century when King Henry VIII broke from papacy and he established Church of England. He became Protestant in order to get married again, and from 16th century in England we have just only Protestant people. Catholic people, they were in minority, and this particular long series war between Catholics and Protestants are satirized by Swift by presenting the war between the Big Endians and Small Endians. Swift writes in chapter number 4, or you can say that Reldresal informs Gulliver that their holy book says that egg should be broken at a convenient end, and from the ancient time it was believed that big end is the most convenient end. But the present emperor's grandfather, when he was a small child, while breaking the egg with a big end, he cut his finger, and then after his father he made a law that now onwards egg should be cut with a small end. People opposed it, and thereafter there were 6 rebellions. 11,000 people were executed, and then after Big Endians, they took shelter in a nearby island that is known as Blefuscu, and Small Endians people, they are residing at Lilliput. So this whole episode, how to cut egg, it's a really very much trivial thing, but it really symbolizes the nature or the difference in sacrament. Those who are Christians, they know very well that Catholics people, they receive communion. So it represents the manner of communion. The grandfather who cut his finger represents King Henry VIII, who broke from papacy and who created the Church of England. Next please. In chapter number 5 of book number 1, we have the naval victory of Gulliver. He fought against Blefuscu and he became victorious. He was given the highest title of Lilliput, Nardak. Now the king of Lilliput wants that he should conquer the whole Blefuscu, but he denied, and therefore there was a disharmony between the king and Gulliver. Next please. In chapter number 6 of book number 1, we are given the culture, the tradition, the customs and the education system of Lilliput, and through this description, we can say that Swift talked about utopian country. His ideal state is represented in chapter number 6, but by the time Gulliver reached, it was not in the practice. Chapter number 6. In chapter number 7,
Gulliver learns that the government has turned against him. This was very important thing that chapter number 7 focused on. He is accused of high treason. The emperor is persuaded that Gulliver should be blinded instead of being killed. This reflects the impeachment of Bolingbroke and Oxford, where it was suggested that he should be only accused of misdemeanors rather than treason. So this was this was basically, it was shown into chapter number 7. Over to you, ma'am, again.
Charges of treason were on Gulliver, and therefore he decided to go to Blefuscu. So he escaped from Lilliput. So in book number 1, religious dissension as well as political dissensions of Swift's time are satirized, especially in chapter number 4. And he talked about George I, even he talked about Queen Anne, because there is one episode also in which he urinated on the palace, and then after the Queen was very much angry on Gulliver. Exactly, it was Queen Anne's anger for Swift. If we look at book number 2, in which we are taken to Brobdingnag, Gulliver reached at Brobdingnag. First, he was found by one farmer. He lived with farmer. Here at the house of farmer, he became very much friendly with his daughter, whose name was Glumdalclitch. Glumdalclitch was, you can say that she was a little nurse. Through her, Gulliver learned the language of Brobdingnagian people, and the farmer who was the owner, he exhibited Gulliver and he made lots of money. Due to such kind of exhibition, Gulliver was about to die. Now he was very much useless to the farmer, and therefore the farmer decided to sell this Gulliver to the king, because the queen was very much interested in Gulliver. When Gulliver was exhibited, the queen became very much happy, and Gulliver's life with the king and the queen at Brobdingnag started. And here we have the satire. Gulliver, in order to show that how his country was very much glorious, he narrated the history of English people to Brobdingnagian king. The Brobdingnagian king listened the history very much carefully, and in return, after listening the history of English people and English kings, the king in return asks Gulliver. And here we have the satire. The king asks how the nobles were educated and whether they were greedy and corrupt, whether the bishop got their promotion because of their goodness and knowledge of religion, whether people spent lots of money to get elected to the House of Commons, whether they tried to get this money back by corrupt practice, whether people had to spend much time and money in getting justice, whether advocate pleaded for the wrong cause, for wrong causes for money. And here we can say that when Brobdingnagian king asks such kind of question, he becomes the mouthpiece of Swift. Swift has asked, or the questions that are in the minds of Swift are asked by Brobdingnagian king, and Gulliver was unable to answer such kind of, means he is unable to give any kind of answers. On the contrary,
there's a famous quotation which says that a heap of conspiracy, rebellions, murders, massacres, revolutions, banishments, the very worst effects that arise: faction, hypocrisy, perfidiousness, cruelty, rage, madness, hatred, envy, malice, and ambition could produce.
Do you know, sir, that this particular comment was made by the king when Gulliver informs him gunpowder, when he suggests him one remedy that he can kill thousands of people if he know how to make gunpowder. And king was very much surprised because here his height is 60 feet and he thinks that how can such a little person think about killing so many people, and therefore he makes such kind of comment. And after listening the history, the most famous statement he speaks that we have in book number 2, he says that the kind of people that you have in country, the kind of narration that you have given, by that I can conclude that the mankind about whom you are speaking, they are the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. So, in book number 2, the satire is not on politics, but it is on mankind. And with that, if we look at book number 3, then now satire means it goes from mankind to science. In book number 3, the satire is on various aspects of science. It is on learning, it is on politics, it is on the contemporary life. In the 3rd book, we are taken to the voyage to Lapota. There is a satire on human intellect, human mind, and on science, philosophy and mathematics. However, his satire is not very bitter. We are greatly amused by useless experiments and researches which are going on at Academy of Projectors in Lugado. Here scientists wants to extract sunbeams out of cucumbers to convert human excrement into original food, to build a house from the roof downward to the foundation, to obtain silk from cobwebs, and to produce books on various subjects by the use of machines without having to exert one's brain. Their heads were inclined either to the right or to the left. One of their eye turned inward and the other directly up to zenith. Next. Swift amuses us by making a fun of the people whose sole interest are music and geometry. He writes, they made a lot of theories but practically nil. Swift here ridicules scientists, academics, planners, intellectuals, in fact, all people who proceed only according to theory, which are useless when they come to actual practice. He satirizes historians and literary critics, though Gulliver's interviews with the ghost of famous dead. The point of satire is that historians often distort facts and literary critics often misinterpret great authors like Homer and Aristotle. If we come to the last book, in book number 4, we have very strange creatures like Honihims and Yahoos. In the 4th voyage to Honihims, there is a bitter, poignant satire on human moral shortcomings. The voyage contains some of the most corrosive and offensive satire on mankind. By contrast, the Honihims are noble and benevolent horses who are governed by reason and lead an ordered life. It is indeed a bitter criticism on the human race to be compared by the Honihims. Next, he speaks of the numerous deadly weapons employed by European nations for destructive purpose, Many people in his country ruin themselves by drinking, gambling, and debauchery, and many are guilty of murders, theft, robbery, forgery, and rape. The master speaks of the Yahoos' love of shining stones, their gluttony, their weakness for liquor. The master also speaks of the behavior of the female Yahoos. By contrast, the Honihims are excellent beings. Next, please. So, if we look at all the 4 books, we can say that swift purpose here is to attribute to horses. If we look at especially on book number 4, then here swift purpose is to attribute to horses certain qualities which would normally be expected in human beings, but which are actually lacking in them. Gulliver's reaction to Honihims fills him so much admiration for them, and with so much hatred and disgust for human beings, that he has no desire even to return to his family. So, if we look at all the 4 books of Gulliver's Travels, then we can say that Gulliver's Travels is a great piece of art. Slide please. It's a great piece of art containing social satire in it. Every satirist is at heart a reformist. Swift also wants to reform the society by pinpointing the vices and the shortcomings in it, and he very successfully satirizes on political tactics, physical awkwardness, intellectual fallacies, and moral shortcomings. That's all, friends.
We are trying to focus. What we did was we tried to discuss about the literary tendencies of Augustan age, about the major satirist Juvenal, Horace, and all. We try to focus on the political scenario of the Augustan age, about the age in which Gulliver's Travels was written. Why this was very much required was because Gulliver's Travels is basically known as a political satire, and to understand why Gulliver's Travels is a satire, we need to understand about the political scenario of that particular era. We came to know about Tory party, the Whig party, about Walpole, about the kings and the queens, the Lilliputians, and about the 4 voyages, the 4 journey that he undergoes. And in these 4 journeys he experiences several things. He satirizes basically mankind, and we should not forget what madam said, that basically the job of a satirist is to reform. He wants to improve the society, and thereby what was lacking into the society in which Swift was living, he tried to reform it through the book that was very famous in among the small babies and all. On and all, it was a very nice experience. I would like to really thank you, madam, for discussing this. That's all from the BISEC we have. Thank you.